CPL Newsroom presented by Volkswagen, back again earlier in the week. Charlie O'Connor-Clark with Mitchell Tierney, and we have almost gotten over Canada's World Cup loss, but we're not going to spend too much time on that today because the CPL is fully back in kind of regular scheduled service until obviously this week when it's off again for the Canadian Championship.
Quick little return.
But we're back briefly. It was a fun weekend. We had winners in all four games. Cavalry, I wrote trotting past Atletico Ottawa because we love using a horse pun with them. That was a pretty big triumph for them in their CPL final rematch in the capital and Nathan Ingham's return. What else did we have this weekend, Mitch? Vancouver FC over in Toronto 4-0. We had Forge beating FC Supra in their first visit to Laval. And then, of course, the Halifax Wanderers beating Pacific FC. But we'll start up at the top of that with Cavalry. 3-0 over Atletico Ottawa, Mitch. This Cavalry team is lethal. You know, what impresses you about them and their ability to really, really punish an opponent?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, they're missing Tobias Borszewski, who's arguably not even arguably, he's one of the best strikers.
Player.
Yeah, and he's one of the best strikers in CPL history, yes. One of the best players in CPL history. And they don't miss a beat. Like, Kenija Alva comes in, and again, this is a guy that is probably starting for most other, if not all other teams in the Canadian Premier League.
Yeah.
And in his second season with the club, I think he's been even better than the first year. So dominant in the air, and obviously he comes in, gets a goal and an assist, and is involved in all three of their goals. Gote Intigny has hit another level recently, and I think that's been really what's igniting their attack in a lot of ways, is just what a weapon he is with that pace and just skill down the left-hand flank. And you see it on the third goal they score where, you know, he has that patience to fake once and then wait it out so that Alva can make that run for the header. Like,
yep.
They're scoring from set pieces.
Making the header on a play that he started as well, because
exactly.
Alva plays the ball out to Kenija.
Yeah.
To Gote. He didn't play it to himself, but he eventually played it to himself because he scored the
goal. But you look at, I mean, they score on a super nice set piece to start it. They're scoring on counterattacks. They're scoring in, breaking down low blocks. Like, this is a team that right now is firing on all cylinders. And I do think, like, there's something to be said about it being the guys you expect to score are scoring. Like, I think that always helps a team. Confidence-wise, like, obviously it's good, and over the course of the season you're going to need different guys to pitch in, but when your strikers and when your attackers are really scoring, and Camargo, Alva, Borszewski, Intigny, like, all these guys are really pushing and getting a lot of obviously personal stats, but for the team I think that's very helpful as well, and to do it in the nation's capital as well. I think it was 27 straight matches that Ottawa had not lost at TD Place.
Yeah.
Before Calgary comes in. They were also the last team to do it back in 2024 to win there. So reversing a little bit, Ottawa had been their bogey team, but this season it looks like Calgary are kind of reversing that a little bit.
Yeah, certainly not forgetting that final, but looking for revenge at every possible point. I think it's a good point, though, about the players that score for Cavalry. Like, their stars are their stars in a lot of senses. They've got really no weak spots in the lineup across the board. Yeah. They've got quality in every position, but the guys contributing to goals, as you said, are the ones that you'd expect to. It's an interesting kind of parallel, actually, I think, with Forge. We were talking about this earlier. I don't think that either of these is wrong in any way. It's just interesting to see that Cavalry has their Camargos and their Intignys and their Borszewskis and their Elvas contributing most of their goals. And Forge, they're getting goals from all over the place, right? I think Brian Wright is leading them in scoring, as you'd hope your striker would. Mm-hmm. But they've got lots of goals from the defense. They've got lots of goals from midfield, and it's just a little bit interesting seeing the kind of different approaches or the different ways that these two teams that are, it seems, fated for another CPL Shield battle are scoring their goals. So it's fun to watch. Obviously, I don't think anybody would disagree with us saying that there's a significant gap right now between the top two teams in the league and the other six below them, and it feels like that gap between the tiers is maybe larger than it's ever been in the CPL. But that just is what pushes other teams forward. They know what level they have to get to. They know what they have to do. Well, they know that they have to get to that level. Because these are the two kind of classes of the league at the moment. But speaking of the teams that are chasing and the playoff race that we are starting to see, Vancouver Inter Toronto.
Yeah.
This was a very, very interesting game that maybe shifts a lot of the narratives, when we look back at the kind of the whole season's playoff race, because a lot of this year we've been talking about Toronto.
Yeah.
They
as the
incumbent, they went into the World Cup break conceding 12 goals in 3 games. They come out of the World Cup break conceding 4 goals in the first half to a Vancouver team that is going to be one of their main competitors for playoff spot. Maybe before we get more into Vancouver, just very quickly, it's disappointing to see Inter Toronto come out like that, right?
It's concerning, is
Very
what
concerning.
It is, because, if you lose a couple of games by, even 4 games or so, like by a couple goals, and you're right in those games, like that's one thing, but to lose them big, that kind of suggests guys are checking out and not believing. And, I think you see it on a few of the goals and the way they happen, of guys not backing each other up, of, Diego Arteaga. I think he's had a pretty rough last little stretch, even if he's been making some saves as well. And, you see the second goal that Vancouver score, where Frank Stirring sticks his foot in the lane and deflects that. You kind of wonder if that happens, if they believe a little bit more in the man behind them to make those saves. Not to obviously pin this on one guy. I think it's pretty clearly, when you're conceding that many and not scoring to back it up, it's a team structure issue. But these are the little things that you look at that suggest a massive issue for them right now, and a big concern, like you said, for a team that, just a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about them maybe pushing up with those big boys, and now it seems like they're fighting for their lives in that murky middle of the CPL right now.
Yeah, they really are. And again, as we said last week, long road ahead. They've got 2 games in hand on everybody they're chasing. They've got 3 games in hand on Halifax.
Yeah.
And they are 2 points. Sorry, nope, can't read. 3 points out of a playoff spot. But that's 1 game, right?
Yeah.
And they've got these games in hand, but they have to sort it out quickly.
Yeah.
Right, because it can slip away from you very, very fast in the Canadian Premier League if you don't take advantage of your opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But the team that did take advantage of the opportunities, punished Toronto for those defensive mistakes, was Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right, and again, this is a Vancouver team that we've been impressed with in the football they played a lot of this year. They went into the break well. They came out of it almost well, going 2-0 up against Forge, and they responded to that with an even better first half, and then, maybe not an attacking second half, but they kind of responded to the way that they collapsed against Forge by really shutting it down. Took advantage of the opportunities that were presented to them and punished them was Vancouver FC against Inter Toronto. This is a team that we've been impressed with a lot throughout this year. Results haven't always been there, but going into the break they were. Nearly came out of the World Cup break really well in Hamilton with those 2 goals in the first half. Collapsed in the second half. This feels like a response to that, in a bit of a, certain ways. Obviously, they scored in different ways because you have to play differently against Toronto to Forge. But for me, seeing Vancouver not only have an even better first half than they had in Hamilton, but then respond in the second half by shutting it down, whereas last week against Forge they kind of collapsed, or not even last week, like on Wednesday, they kind of collapsed. This is a massive improvement. And I think something that Martin Nash is going to be very happy with, right?
Yeah, for sure. I love that 2 goals wasn't enough in Hamilton. Let's go home and
4
score
in
4.
the first half. Yeah.
Let's double it up here, and probably no one's coming back from that, especially with, like you said, the way they shut it down in the second half.
Yeah. Because their defenders were really good. Like that's why there are several Vancouver defenders in a 4-0 win in the Team of the Week.
Yeah, exactly. Similar to Cavalry, this seems like a team where the guys that should be scoring are scoring right now for this team. Look at Taron Campbell, the way he's stepped up. But this week it's Mo Amisi, who's now our Golden Boot leader in the Canadian Premier League after a hat trick, and that's a guy who's been really impressive coming in for them and providing goals in a way that few players have in the history of this club. And Tierno Ba looks like a player who's back to his confidence. Yeah, he was brilliant again. You know, he did a number on Osvaldo Leon in this game, and the confidence that he, or the way he plays when he does have that confidence is on another level, and he's been brilliant of late, and again in this game, like, you know, 2 on a platter, first for Mosquita, then for Amisi, and you love the way he's playing right now, and you love the way this team is playing right now, and the way they responded to, again, a result in Hamilton that really could have hurt their confidence coming back from the break and being like, oh, here we go again, in terms of what it was like at the start of the season. Can't ask for a better response than a 4-0 win against a team that is in direct competition with you for, you know, what you're hoping is the first ever playoff spot in club history.
Yeah, they just feel so much more dangerous when they've got their big names performing.
Yeah.
Especially when Tierno Baz at the top of his game. We saw what he could do last year. I think even he would have been a little disappointed with the start of this season, but he looks back in a really major way for this Vancouver team, and it is a really good sign for them the rest of the season, because this is, to me, a team that has absolutely everything it takes to be in this playoff race, and they will definitely be very disappointed if they're not in the playoffs at the end of this year, especially considering the way they're playing right now. We'll actually be back talking about them in a couple minutes when we talk about a Canadian Championship, but quickly before we move on from this weekend's CPL stuff, Halifax Pacific, obviously Pacific were in Halifax not so long ago, didn't go well for them there. They host Halifax this time around. Again, a tough result for Pacific FC. I think the main point, though, that we wanted to hit here on Halifax is just the fact that they won on the road, which is something that historically the Halifax Wanderers have struggled with, right? But now this year they've got 2 away wins. How important is it to just their overall fortunes that they are picking up a result that they'll feel they should be picking up away from home?
Yeah, it's the way they do it as well, obviously, like defending late, you know, getting a goal after the equalizer to go up ahead. But yeah, just the way they manage that game, I think, is something with when you have guys like Carducci, a TMG returning, which is going to be huge for them the back half of the season. But the way that those veterans of the league are able to manage those moments in the way that, you know, Halifax teams I don't think have in the past, and they certainly haven't away from home. You know, it's only their second ever win at Starlight Stadium, which is, you know, pretty crazy when you think of the history of this club and the league. So these are the kind of performances and games that if they want to be in that play, and they're in a playoff spot right now, if they want to maintain that spot, they're going to need to, you know, get a few more of these at least this year. And then you take care of business at home. But the fact that, you know, we've seen this twice now where they're able to go out and get gritty performances on the road, it's incredibly, you know, it's a good sign of the progress of this group.
Yeah, it's just important, I think, psychologically to remind yourself that you're able to win on the road. Yeah. For context, and I don't know why I'm waving this pen around the whole show, but for context, a Canadian Premier League team plays 14 games on the road every season, every regular season.
Yeah.
Right? 14. Last year, the Halifax Wanderers set a club record for wins on the road with 4.
Yeah.
Right? The year before, in 2024, they had 1. In 23, they had 2. In 22, they had 3 wins on the road. 2021, they had 1. 2019, they had 1. Right? So they've already got 2 this year. They've got, I don't know the exact number on the road they have left, but they've played 13 games. They're not even at the halfway point of their season. So I think there is important progress there. And that's kind of, you know, what often makes or breaks a playoff push, right, is being able to pick up results in the tougher environments and the tougher situations. But the Halifax Wanderers now have another weekend off, right?
Yeah.
You know, obviously, they had a quick return to play with 3 games in a week there, with home and then home on Canada Day and away to Pacific. But now they're off because they are not in the quarterfinals of the Canadian Championship. That's where we're going next. TELUS Canadian Championship quarterfinals begin on Wednesday. Mitchell, all 4 ties kick off with their first leg on the same day, which is exciting. Which Canadian Championship quarterfinal tie are you most intrigued by?
Oh man, that's a tough one to begin, because there's certainly things that you can look at in all of them. I think for me it's got to be the Whitecaps against Cavalry FC. I mean, it starts at a historic Canadian soccer venue at Swangard Stadium, with the Whitecaps hosting that first leg. But like, just how close every single matchup between these two, like the history of of Cavalry being the first team to beat from the CPL to beat an MLS team in this competition when they beat the Whitecaps. You know, the second one went to penalties. I think that was the first year that Vancouver ended up going all the way and starting their four-peat. And then, you know, they lose on away goals back when that was a consideration in this competition.
Yep, no longer.
Yep, no longer. So it's been super marginal in each of these meetings. And I think that's going to be the case again, even though this is a Whitecaps team that obviously is one of the better in MLS. You know, we've talked about the way that Cavalry are absolutely flying right now. Can they go out and do something special at Swangard and obviously then return home this weekend? Like, I think it sets up very nicely for them. And, you know, I think that this is the perfect time for them to take on, you know, what is really a behemoth of Canadian soccer over the past 4 years.
I agree. It would be a really good kind of stamp of how good his Cavalry team is. And it's not to say anymore that it's surprising when CPL teams beat MLS teams, right?
No.
Atletico Ottawa did it earlier this year against Toronto FC, but it's always a challenge. I'm also excited to see Toby Warshevsky following Thomas Muller around after the game, trying to get his shirt. I think we mentioned it on this show, but he has already kind of laid the law down with his teammates to tell him that he's getting Muller's shirt. Nobody else is allowed to, because that was obviously Toby's idol growing up, right? You know, as a German, and he was a Dortmund fan growing up, so maybe not.
Fellow Space Invader is Tobias Warshevsky. They play kind of a similar style of football.
Yeah, in a way, I think so. But yeah, that'll be a lot of fun seeing those kind of stars go up against each other. I'm excited about Atletico Ottawa and Supra over two legs with it. These are two teams that have had a couple really fun games. That Tuesday night before the World Cup break, phenomenal game.
Yeah.
And I hope that this is a moment that can really spark what I think should be one of the CPL's best, more local rivalries.
Yeah.
Right? Montreal is, 2 hours down the road from Ottawa? And this feels like the natural early rival to FC Supra is Atletico Ottawa. And they've been a challenge for them in their two meetings so far. That's going to be a lot of fun, and it would also be pretty remarkable for if Supra were to get through and go to the CanChamp semifinal in their first ever year.
Yeah,
that would be a good story. The other matchups though are fun. Obviously, Forge playing CS Saint Laurent. That Saint Laurent magic. We'll see how far it carries them. They are always a remarkable story in Canadian soccer, but going into Hamilton is very hard. And then we've been talking about Vancouver. They're playing CF Montreal. Vancouver at maybe the height of their recent powers right now. Montreal, who knows?
Yeah.
One of the unique parts of this CanChamp quarterfinal setup is the CPL teams have been playing the last few weeks. The MLS teams have been off. It's kind of the opposite of like the CONCACAF Champions Cup, right? How much of a shot do you give Vancouver FC of also making some history for themselves against Montreal?
Well, they won't be overawed by this situation, that's for sure. Obviously, having played the Whitecaps in the final of this competition last year, and then Cruz Azul in Mexico and at home earlier this year. So I think that in terms of CPL clubs, like they're pretty much just as battle tested as anyone to know what it's going to take to at least compete in this game. And like you said, they're playing some great football right now. And for CF Montreal, there'll be that bit of doubt as well. I think it's 2 years in a row that they've gone out to Forge, out to a CPL club. So obviously it'll be huge for them to try and change that. But at the same time, like they know they can lose these games. So if something starts to go wrong, then that might be interesting. And we've been talking about Thierry Nova. He was the hero for them in the competition last year, and having him play the way he is right now, it could be a massive difference maker. So, over two legs, it's going to be incredibly difficult for this Vancouver team. Obviously, I think the two legs adds, it takes away just a tiny bit of that chaos, and it means you don't just have to perform over 90 minutes; you have to perform over 180 potentially plus minutes. With that being said, I think that they are well equipped and well built for this, and this is a great time for them to take on this challenge.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver did do a good job last year of managing the two-legged ties.
Yeah.
Right? They did it, obviously, against Cavalry in the quarterfinal, and then especially, I think, in my opinion, against Atletico Ottawa in the semifinal.
Yeah.
They came out hard at home.
Yeah.
They played really well. Again, let's remember, that Atletico Ottawa team at the time was a wagon.
Yeah.
They were so good in the CPL last year, and Vancouver were struggling in the league. But they came out in that first leg at home in Langley. They hit them hard. Second leg, they bent but didn't break.
Yeah.
Right? They knew it would be tough going away, and it's going to be a similar situation this time. Obviously, playing an MLS team is different, but it's a similar maybe structure in what Martin Nash is going to be asking for is to come out strong at home, build yourself some kind of a result to build on, and then you go into Montreal knowing what you have to do and hoping that. Just hoping that you can do something similar, because it would be magic. But we love the Canadian Championship, but I think it's time, okay? Like, we finally need a CPL team to win this trophy.
Yeah.
There's only so many years that we can talk about how exciting it is for our teams to be in the semifinals and to be going toe-to-toe with these MLS teams. I want to beat them. I want to win this trophy in the Canadian Premier League, and I think that we have a fantastic chance of that this year. We've got 5 CPL teams left in the competition. I think it's the year for one of them. Okay, final part of the show that we're going to do here is, and we've been doing this the last few weeks, is just kind of like a World Cup wrap-up and reminisce. It is a bit of a bittersweet time for us around Canadian soccer, coming back to like regular work. We've been in the office on a normal schedule this week, which is just a little disheartening after being out and about and around the World Cup the last few weeks. But Mitchell, it's about this kind of time that we start seeing people talk about legacy and the next World Cup cycle. In the 4 years, we saw some Canadian national team players returning to Toronto on Sunday night, and a few of them spoke about the future of Canadian soccer and where we're going. And a lot of them actually mentioned specifically the CPL, right? Ali Ahmed was talking about how the CPL is a league of opportunity, a league of, he used the words, hidden talent. And kind of mentioned it in a way of being part of the future of Canada's national team. He said specifically he thinks there are players in the CPL that will be going probably with him to the World Cup in 2030. How big a piece of that narrative do you think the CPL is now that the World Cup is over and we go back to the normal rhythm of the game in this country?
I think it's absolutely massive. And I think this is the time where obviously this was a heavily successful World Cup on every level, on the pitch, off the pitch, the scenes, the
Canada.
Moments. Yeah, of course, in Canada. Yeah, specifically in Canada. But the scenes.
We're not doing the
moments.
Fuller and Balogun thing.
No,
but
no.
sorry.
No. The scenes, the emotions, like the moment of Stefan Eustachio's goal, those were all massive. But this obviously isn't the time for anyone in Canadian soccer to pat themselves on the back.
No.
Obviously appreciate what we've done, what this team's done, what this Canadian soccer community has accomplished and how far we've come. But this is the time while everyone's watching still to build, to take those next steps, to invest. And really, when you look at Canada soccer and what's going to come out of this tournament, like having a national domestic league and how important that will be, and not just one that's obviously starting, like one that is already in the running and now just needs, a little bit more investment and interest to, I think, really explode and to provide even more opportunity. We're already seeing it with 8 clubs and these budding academy structures and different things of the kind of players that the Canadian Premier League's producing. More clubs in more markets, more opportunity for players, coaches, administrators. Like that's what's going to really take the Canadian soccer ecosystem to that next level. And it's not just the CPL, obviously. It's all the academies and structures and everyone working together. But having the CPL at the top of that pyramid in a way that we've never really had anything close to what we've had underneath the CPL or at the CPL level in this country, I think is really that next step for Canadian soccer. And the next 4 years, right, like this is where on the day in, day out, in terms of now we've set that expectation of Canada being at a World Cup and competing at a World Cup. It's going to be harder next time. We're going to have to qualify. We're not going to be a Pod A team.
Nope.
But with that being said, like there's so much more interest and there is so much more infrastructure here in Canada to set this team up and this program up to do something special over the next 4 years and to do something, even better in 2030. So it's going to take a lot of work, but having the Canadian Premier League is, a core part of what can provide the blueprint to build up is huge right now.
For me, the Canadian Premier League is a big part of the legacy of this World Cup in Canada. When the tournament was awarded to us, the league was just under a year from kicking off. It had been announced, but we kicked off in 2019. And now, 8 years later, the CPL is in full swing. We've got a very healthy Premier Soccer leagues kind of forming that pyramid, that ecosystem. We've got the NSL. There's just so much more, and obviously the 3 Canadian MLS teams as well. There's just so much more soccer going on at a high level, week to week, day to day in this country. That is so important for pushing the game forward, and is, as you've been saying, kind of what this country has been needing. And now that the World Cup has moved on and the global spotlight moves away from our country, the game is still here. Every single week for most of the year, well, not during the winter, but every single week through the season, through the summer, you can go and watch a Canadian soccer team play. And it is very important that people do so because these teams are developing the next players that you're going to see at World Cups, men's World Cups, women's World Cups. This is where talent and the next generation of talent comes from. And that's so important in this country because we haven't always had it before. But anyway, I think we're going to leave it there because we've had plenty to talk about. But Canadian Championship obviously coming up this week, all on OneSoccer as usual. 4 games on Wednesday, opening those quarterfinal ties. We'll be back with you next week where we will know 3 of the 4 semi-finalists in the Canadian Championship. But until then, enjoy all the action. Enjoy a couple more World Cup knockout matches that we can just kind of sit and enjoy now that most of the Canadian involvement is done after Tuesday night in Vancouver, of course. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.